I thought it was an entertaining game, and most blowouts aren't. 14 years, 3 Pro Bowlers, Fox Sports analyst. So we had said coming into it, when you get to this point in the season, Greg, you know this. Every day counts. Every day you can be in the tub, in the ice room. You can get therapy. I kind of felt like a rested Niner team really did have a situational advantage on a team that came out of an overtime game. Did you feel like that going in?
We did. I think when we started kind of breaking down the game, the night before and all week, I think when we said it at the top of the broadcast, it's not an excuse, and no coach is ever going to address it. No coach is ever going to use it leading up to the game. When we talked to Nick Sirianni, he said, listen, we know this is hard. We knew all year this was going to be the stretch of games that was going to challenge us. But I think the reality is it did matter. I do think. Now, do I think if they came in on 10 days rest like San Francisco, they would have beat San Francisco? I don't think anyone's beating San Francisco when they play like that. So I think that's first and foremost. I think San Fran was just the better team yesterday. But with that being said, they go 2 back-to-back thrillers, one going into overtime. Their defense played 92 snaps last week against Buffalo, end up winning from behind. I think the physical toll, but even when we talked about the emotional toll, just continuing to get up week after week and play the biggest game of the season every single week. You get everyone's best shot. I think I don't think it's an excuse, but there's no question it was definitely a factor.
There's also, as you know, Greg, having played 14 years, there are teams that you matched up better against. The reality is Philly lost their best linebacker. They got new coordinators, and the skill people for the Niners, Greg, they're Hall of Fame level talent. Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey. And the guys on the back end for Philly, they're older, or they're good players. They're not Hall of Fame level. I watch this matchup and I think, as long as Kyle can get the ball out, 3-step shotgun out, it's a matchup problem for Philadelphia with this. I mean, even if they met again, it's not like Debo, Christian, and George are going to be less talented.
Yeah, and that was something we tried to kind of set the stage early in the game. The strength of Philly's defense is, of course, the front. It's their 5-man, the rotation, the D-line, the depth, the edge, their ability to not only be strong interior against the run, but the edge pressure, being able to rush the passer. So the question for Kyle Shanahan was, okay, how do I take advantage of some pass opportunities on the second and third level? They got 2 backups playing linebacker, a secondary that's one of the bottom 5 in the league. How do we take advantage of the back end and the space in the passing game without letting one of the best fronts in the league take over? So that was the equation. What's great about Shanahan's system is it's built to protect the protectors, right? Aside from Trent Williams, they can then kind of scheme their way, play action pass, quick game, half boots, get the ball out of Purdy's hand, not stress the protection, and then allow Debo Samuel and McCaffrey and Kittle and Ayuk and all those guys you just mentioned to then take advantage. And that's the chess match. But that's the advantage of this Shanahan system. There's no system in the league that does a better job protecting the guys up front, which then passes that protection along to the quarterback. And then when you have the skill players that he has and the ability to scheme up open space, run after catch, it's a nightmare. And when they're healthy, and again, that 3-game skid, they lost Debo. We saw McCaffrey get knocked out of the Cleveland game. They lost Debo, Trent Williams, and McCaffrey all in the same game. The other 2 didn't come back. McCaffrey played. Now that they're healthy, I think a healthy 49ers team, I think it's hard to make an argument that they're not the best team in the league right now.
So you know this. So you were a high draft pick, but you walked into your camps and you'd see 5th, 6th round guys, undrafted guys, and you knew at 3 or 4 practices in, whoa, this guy can really play. So we have Kurt Warner undrafted, Tony Romo undrafted, the GOAT, Tom Brady, blah, 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 6th round. I look at Brock Purdy, and I'm like, doesn't have a huge arm. He's not Jalen Hurts mobile. But when you are in that stadium and you see the play develop, what does he do where you go, okay, this is not just players and coaching? Like, what do you see where you're like, okay, you were in this league for a long time. You've seen guys who can spin it. He makes some throws, right?
Yeah, I think, obviously, we know the things that work against him. Everything you just mentioned, his draft status, being Mr. Irrelevant. He's not the tallest guy. He's not going to win the combine. He's not going to win he's not going to be the most impressive looking quarterback on the field. But there's 2 things that separate him. He is a highly elite processor. When you talk to Kyle Shanahan, I had a minute to talk with Sam Darnold before the game, who I've gotten to know from his time here in Carolina. And he said, listen, I've been around a lot of guys. And this was unsolicited. We were just kind of BSing on the field, just kind of catching up. And he goes, he processes and can go through reads. He can check off, okay, that's a bad look, get out of that faster than any quarterback or any guy that I've ever played with at any level. I mean, that's a pretty unique conversation for a guy that's only in his second year as a starter, first year as a full season starter. So he does that. He does that highly at a high level, and he does a great job operating in muddy environments. There's times where there's leakage. There's time where he has to move in the pocket. There's time the protection's not perfect. There's bodies around him, and he is highly accurate. So I think those two things, being highly accurate and being a fast processor, you can make up for not being 6'3". You can make up for not running 4'5". I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to make up for maybe physical limitations, but the notion that he's just the feel-good story, that has to be put to rest. Like, this guy is a full-blown NFL starter. That conversation, in my mind, should be put to rest. Will he win the MVP? I don't know. Is he in the five-man race? Absolutely.
So you had Greenlaw and the Eagles kind of security guard on the sideline. Everybody's got a strong opinion on it. I always kind of feel like players have to, and it's really hard to ask a player, you guys are all going 1,000 miles an hour, and to say, hey, be calm, be collected. Well, it's easy for a guy like me to say that. You guys are going to, your hair's on fire and you're breathing. What did you make of this?
I'll be honest, in the moment, and watching it again is kind of surreal. In the moment, it brought some life to our game. You know, it was getting out of hand there for a minute, and San Fran was kind of running away. We thought coming out of the second half that Philly needed a little spark. They needed a little juice. This was it for a brief period of time. And again, Big Dom, who's kind of become a local legend, but before this and obviously now after it, he can't put his hands on Greenlaw. That's no question. Me personally, I don't think any of it really warranted either one of them getting ejected.
Yeah.
You know, Greenlaw got the penalty. He kind of suplexed Smith. That was clearly a penalty. The sidelines kind of put their hands. I don't necessarily think either one of them did anything that egregious. I mean, I don't think Greenlaw, I think a lot of it was kind of overblown. At the end of the day, yes, Dom cannot put his hands on players. I'm sure Sirianni, you heard him apologize to Shanahan after the game. I think that's for sure. I don't think Greenlaw should have been thrown out. I don't think he should have been removed from the sidelines. The penalty was enforced on the field. Everything else was just emotions running hot. But it did bring some energy and some fun life to the game, so we had a good time with it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like you did. We in the media sometimes we want this immediate reaction after a win or a loss, and it's like, can we let these players their hair's on fire? You've been in these. You're a smart, conscientious guy. You've probably lost yourself for a moment in the game, have you not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why I think, again, when you look back on it, I really didn't think, even in the moment, and we kind of had made light of it to a degree, and I think people are overreacting. I'm reading articles today that the Philadelphia, head of security Dom, like, he needs to be banned from NFL sidelines forever. I just feel like people just take everything to the complete extreme. I don't think there's any possibility of suspension for Greenlaw. I don't think him to me, it looked like he was like pointing in his face less than trying to strike him.
Yeah.
So the refs were trying to get a hold of it. I thought it actually brought some fun excitement. Philly ended up finishing the drive with 2 quarterback sneaks. At some point, they're going to run a quarterback sneak from 1st and goal on the 5 at this point. It just keeps getting further and further away. But that was a big moment. And then San Fran converts on 3rd down, the ensuing drive, and then Debo breaks 5 tackles and busted the game back open. But for a minute there, that 5-6 minutes of that quarter, that was when the game kind of came to life a little bit.
Okay, so we were saying this. I know you were flying home, and Jordan Love played Mahomes, and I said that it didn't matter if Jordan Love won. If he would get a huge buy-in in the building if he could look like when Goff beat Mahomes in L.A. Had he not won, you were like, oh, Goff can go toe-to-toe with Mahomes. We got ourselves a franchise guy. This guy can take us places. Because personnel departments every year are looking, they're looking over your shoulder. And I thought with Jordan Love last night, win or lose, the play calling, they're clearly saying, kid, let it rip. And you know this, not every coordinator does it with his players. So do we lose Greg or we still have Greg? Can you still see us, Greg? No, we just lost him. Greg Olsen. We lost him. I do think, and I said 5-6 weeks ago, I just did not at all see it with Jordan Love. But Matt LaFleur after the game came out and just said, hey, we just told him sometimes you got to let it rip. And it's just the maturation and the growth. He'd been on the bench for 3 years. I figured he'd have it right out of the chute. He didn't. Now he's got it, and it looks special. And I'll tell you this. In the NFC, in the AFC, a lot of these teams have drafted quarterbacks and hit on them. Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. Okay, let's go back to Greg Olsen. So, Greg, we were talking about Jordan Love. I didn't think he had to win, but he had to show that he could go toe-to-toe and make plays. And my takeaway after that game is, if you're a Packer fan, executive, the guys upstairs, the coach, the coordinator, the dude looks like he can play. He can go toe-to-toe. He's a little erratic, but there's a lot there, right?
Yeah, I think it's exciting, right? I think this young, this athletic young wide receiver group that had some struggles early in the season just took a little time. I think Jordan Love kind of rode that up and down roller coaster along with them. We saw him on Thanksgiving up in Detroit. Detroit was kind of the toast of the league. And I didn't think that was a fluke. The games coming into Detroit, Jordan Love was playing his best football week in, week out. Detroit was his best game of his career. And the game before was the best game of his career. And now you could argue the Kansas City game was his best moment of his career, winning at home against the defending Super Bowl champ. So I don't think there's any question. I think this last 5-week kind of sample size of Jordan Love, I don't think he's just playing good relative to a young player making his first, full season as a starter. I think he's playing playoff football. I mean, If they continue to play like this and go toe-to-toe with some of the playoff contenders in this league, I think they got a shot to grab that last playoff wild card spot. And I don't know if I'm thrilled playing them, even though I get to play them at home.
Yeah, no, I actually looked at their schedule last night. I think Green Bay, I would vote today that Green Bay gets in. Now, Kansas City, they've had close losses. I kind of feel like, I used the example earlier, it's like Apple stock. I know it's good long-term, but they may occasionally have an iPhone I don't like. It feels like, I know they're going to be fine eventually, but this just feels like a bunch of kid receivers, and Mahomes is trying to pull them along, and they're not there. They don't feel as special this year. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the results and the scores and the metrics and some of the more, the things that we're accustomed, and we said this a little bit about Philly yesterday, and oftentimes in the NFL, you fall victim to your own success. The expectations of what we've seen for years becomes the expectation that if we don't see it on a week-by-week basis, all of a sudden you've completely fallen off the map. I think that's happened with Philly, after yesterday, as people say, oh my God, they're not as good. The defense is not as dominant as it was last year. I think the same thing can be said about, Mahomes and the Chiefs. The reality is Kansas City is still amongst this top tier because of how good this young defense has gotten. Yeah. I mean, they kind of went through a little bit of a young rebuild last year on defense, invested a lot of young picks, a lot of young secondary players and upfront playing, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. They're able to weather turnover because if you have a quarterback and you have a coach, which obviously they have two of the best ever, you can weather turnover at everywhere else. Now, the question is they were able to bring some of those new pass catchers, Juju and Tony and these guys last year and win a Super Bowl. Can they bring this new crop of guys? They have Kelsey, they have Pacheco, they have Mahomes. Can they get the rest of this cast on offense to just be dynamic enough that they don't have to win every game on the back of their defense? Because let's be honest, their defense as a whole across the whole season has been better than their offense has been. It's just their offense has lightning in a bottle because they have the best player in the world, one of the best tight ends of all time, and a couple pieces, and one of the best play callers, head coaches. So they have the pieces on offense to do it at the right spots, but do they have enough guys around them to win a Super Bowl? I think that's the question that remains.
All right. Say hi to Kev. Greg Olsen, great broadcast. Good seeing you again, my friend, on a Monday. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.